What's up, Gear Mortals? Trey Xavier here. Welcome to Gear Gods 2020. I can't believe it. We have waved goodbye to 2019 and it is a brand new decade. And for my first video of the year, I'm going to be checking out the Howard Benson suite from JST. Here we go. So you probably primarily know me as a guitar player, which I am, but I'm also the singer for my band In Virtue and, you know, whatever I need to sing for. For instance, I sang on this song that we're going to be taking a look at today to use as an example, which is from our random drum grooves videos that we do in collaboration with TuneTrack. So this one, we had Elise from Amaranth as our guest singer, and she wanted me to sing on it as well, and I was like, well, okay, if you insist. And when Elise asks, you just say yes. So I sang a bit, did some screaming, growly stuff, and obviously her voice sounds way better than mine, but we're gonna try it a little bit on some female vocals, a little bit on some male vocals, and see what kind of sounds that we can get out of this brand new suite from JST. So let's check it out. So here is the lead vocal from Elise, just all by itself.
Humanity's off the brink, remedy necessary. I cannot compete with your desire.
Sounds great for a raw track, you know, there's nothing on it at all. That's just as she sent it to us. She went to a studio and recorded this. Sounds amazing, but it needs a lot of stuff if it's gonna work in a mix. Like if I solo it with the backing track, it like almost disappears. So we're gonna pull up this Howard Benson vocal suite. So what is it? It's meant to be an all-in-one vocal processing chain. So the idea is that you have a vocal and it has everything in there that you need to make it sound awesome and to work in a mix. You can see right off the bat, it's kind of set up like a 500 series rack thing with each one of these being a little module. As far as I know, you can't move them around or anything unless you have a digital screwdriver to, you can't, I'm kidding. So, but we've got one just called vocals, which is a compressor. We've got an EQ, something called the multiplier, width, echo, which is of course a delay, space, which is a reverb module, and then output, which has the gain, the output gain, and a limiter. The idea is that it's all in one. We've got everything that you could possibly think of to put on a vocal to make it sound good. And that's kind of in line with a lot of the JST stuff that I've reviewed in the past, the Jason Richardson plugin, the Misha Mansour plugin. It's just everything that you need to get the sound that you're going for, so you don't have to open a bunch of other plugins, have them all taking up space in your signal chain. It's just everything. And if you're a singer, you don't want to have to also be an engineer. In case you're not aware, Howard Benson, big time producer, mainly kind of focuses on vocals, big vocals for pop music. He did The Reason by Hoobastank. You've heard that one. You've definitely heard that one. Kelly Clarkson, you know, a lot of All-American Rejects, big hits. If you can make your vocals sound like something on one of his albums, you're gonna have a great time. I can't guarantee that that's what's gonna happen with this, but if it's stuff that he's using or that he likes or has picked, curated for this, then I suspect that we won't be able to go wrong. So I'm, of course, a little bit of an engineer, more of a singer than an engineer. So I want to be able to get a sound pretty much right off the bat and not have to worry about too much. So I'm just going to pull up a preset real quick and see what that does. The first thing, however, that we're going to want to do is use this super cool feature where you can calibrate the input. So it's going to automatically set the input level so that you don't have to worry about how hot it should be coming in. And you're gonna hold shift and then just double click on the input and then you play back the
Humanity's off the brink, remedy necessary. I cannot compete with your desire.
And then it set the input level for us. The preset that I pulled up is just this HB Voc channel, and it's basically a ton of compression. And
humanity's off the brink, remedy necessary. I cannot compete with your desire.
Sounds good. Very smashed, very loud. I mean, let's drop it in the mix real quick.
Humanity's off the brink, remedy necessary. I cannot compete with your desire. So who is it gonna be?
Obviously, all that's really doing is smashing the hell out of it, making it louder, but it sounds pretty awesome. So that's a very dry preset. Let's find one that has a lot of this other stuff on it. We've got one here that just says with effects.
Humanity's off the brink, remedy necessary. I cannot compete with your desire.
That sounds pretty great right off the bat. It's very loud. It's got enough stuff in there to make it sound big and epic, but it's you didn't do anything. I haven't actually done anything yet except click like 3 buttons, and it sounds huge already. So let's start from complete scratch and try out each one of these different modules and see what we can get out of it. All right, so we've used the auto calibrate to set the input gain. Let's mess with the compressor out front.
Remedy necessary. I cannot compete with your desire.
Single knob compressor in terms of the actual ratio and everything. It's all in just one knob. There's a grit knob and an output gain knob, but the actual compression part of it is all just one knob. So it's obviously set up to be simple, simple, simple.
Remedy necessary. I cannot compete with your desire.
So let's set it like somewhere in the middle.
Remedy necessary.
And try out this grit knob.
Remedy necessary. I cannot compete with your desire.
You can get everything from like just a nice little bit of something to make it pop a little bit to this sort of overblown, sort of fuzzed out kind of a thing.
Remedy necessary. I cannot compete with your desire.
So that's pretty cool. You have an auto makeup gain option if you don't want to worry about that at all.
Remedy necessary. I cannot compete with your desire.
And of course,
remedy necessary. I cannot compete with your desire.
even with the grit knob all the way down,
remedy necessary. I cannot compete with.
You get a little bit of that if you want to crank the input all the way.
Remedy necessary. I cannot compete with.
I like it with just a little bit of that.
Remedy necessary.
I like it pretty smashed because obviously this is metal. It's gotta stick out. Let's take a look at the EQ. EQ section, real simple. It's just 3 bands, basically high, middle, and low. If all you wanted to do is add a little bit of high end, add some mids, or add some low, you don't even have to mess with the frequencies. They're set at 8K, 3K, and 60. If you want to be picky, like I'm gonna be, we're gonna take this 3K and put it down to about 2K. And then put this guy at about 300, because I felt as though it kind of needed that. Get there, okay. So let's have a listen.
Remedy necessary. I cannot compete with your desire.
Oh yeah, I mean we could make that real annoying real fast, but we're just gonna give it a little bit. Let's move to a different part of the song so you don't have to listen to that over and over again.
Clock keeps ticking, time's not waiting. Stop, can't let it be. Raise a banner, don't deny it. You're the remedy.
Yeah, see now that's gonna cut way better. And it doesn't sound harsh or anything.
Clock keeps ticking, time's not waiting.
Maybe a little bit. I'm gonna take the grit down a smidge because that kind of seemed to accentuate it.
Clock keeps ticking, time's not waiting. Stop, can't let it be.
And then I'm gonna give it
Raise a banner, don't deny it.
a little bit more oomph with the 300. Not too much.
Clock keeps ticking, time's not waiting.
The EQ also has this button called Bell for the high and low, and that's gonna make a broader Q setting. The mid frequency actually has a Q knob so that you can make it much more specific if you need to, well, more narrow, and if you want to be a little more surgical with what you're doing to the mids.
Raise a banner, don't deny it. You're the remedy. Raise a banner, don't deny it. You're the remedy.
I mean, that sounds pretty good. Let's hear it in the mix.
Raise a banner, don't deny it. You're the remedy.
This feels like more. Just like if you need more. They're like, hey, can you give me just some more? There you go, more, boom. Right now we're actually hearing the EQ after the compressor, and it can make a huge difference if you put it before the compressor. And so let's try that right now. Let's see what that does.
Don't deny it, you're the remedy. I remember, don't you waste it, our time isn't free.
If we put it after, it seems to be a little louder, just because what's going into the front of the compressor is going to change how the compressor reacts. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that on.
Raise the banner, don't deny it, you're the remedy.
We've also got this high pass filter, which is an unspecified number in terms of the frequency, but it high passes it. It's whatever Howard Benson likes, and as far as I'm concerned, sounds good to me.
I remember, don't you waste it, our time isn't free.
And then if you're going for a lo-fi vibe, there's just a button that does that.
I remember, don't you waste it, our time isn't free.
It sounds lo-fi. So there's the EQ module, simple but also pretty powerful, idiot-proof, I would say. And I say that because I managed to get a pretty good sound out of it, and I am an idiot. Moving on, let's take a look at this multiplier. So this is basically a digital sort of doubling effect. Normally what you do is you record your main lead vocal and then you record a double. But sometimes you, I don't know, don't have time, or you don't really want to worry about it, or you just want to make really good sounding demos, and you can, instead of recording 2 tracks, making sure they're all perfectly lined up, spending a lot of time editing, using revoice, all this stuff, you could just hit this little purple switch, and let's hear how that works.
I remember, don't you waste it, our time isn't free. Blood keeps pouring, don't deny it, you're the remedy.
That is pretty amazing.
I remember, don't you waste it, our time isn't free.
That's obviously like going a little heavy-handed with it, but it sounds like a doubled vocal.
I remember, don't you waste it.
I think it basically splits it into 2 signals and makes one of them very slightly drunk. Hear it in the mix.
I remember, don't you waste it, our time isn't free. Blood keeps pouring, don't deny it, you're the remedy.
That's uncanny, actually. That sounds to me like we went in there, got a second vocal take, edited it up nice, and plopped it in there. I'm very impressed with that part. This might be my favorite part so far, mainly because it'll save me a ton of work. So let's put it to sort of a more reasonable amount. That's that's going ham.
I remember, don't you waste it, our time isn't free. Blood keeps pouring, don't deny it, you're the remedy.
Because it'll start to sound a bit like a chorus if it's too much. So that's incredibly easy to make your vocals sound way bigger with literally as little effort as you could possibly imagine. I think it'd be pretty hard to go wrong with any settings on this, honestly. Even with it all the way up, it still sounded really good. So then we've got this width. I'm actually going to turn the multiplier off for right now because width, well, it's not the same. The multiplier did make it sound bigger, so I want to hear what it sounds like just the width.
I remember, don't you waste it, our time isn't free. Blood keeps pouring, don't deny it, you're the remedy.
All right, now I'm gonna bypass the plugin altogether so that you can hear what it sounds like with it on and off in the mix.
I remember, free. Blood keeps pouring, don't.
All right, let's try that solo, because basically it just disappears when I turn it off.
I remember, don't you waste it, our time isn't free. Blood keeps pouring, don't deny it.
And we haven't even turned on any of the time-based effects yet. This is all just processing it to make it sound big and EQing it so far. So, with that in mind, let's move on to the echo section, which is of course a delay. You can sync it to your DAW, and right now it's set to a quarter note.
I remember, don't you waste it, our time isn't free. Blood keeps pouring, don't deny it, you're the remedy.
So of course we're using this directly on the track. This isn't being bussed out or anything. This is 100% wet. So it's pretty easy to go too ham with the delay. This is at 10%.
I remember, don't you waste it, our time isn't free.
Obviously, in a mix, it's gonna need a bit more, like, so here's at 20.
I remember, don't you waste it, our time isn't free. Love keeps pouring, don't deny it, you're the remedy.
Yeah, that sounds great. I didn't even do anything yet. All right, let's see what else we got. We can go all the way from a 16th note, which I think might sound kind of weird.
I remember, don't.
Little slap back.
I remember, don't you waste it.
8th note.
I remember.
Dotted 8th.
I remember, don't you waste it, our time isn't free. I remember, don't you waste it, our time isn't free.
And then there's this option to make the repeats lo-fi.
I remember, don't you waste it, our time isn't free.
Sort of like a tape or analog bucket brigade type of delay for a more vintage type of a sound, or if you just don't want the delay to stick out quite that much. And then of course you can turn the sync on and off to make it milliseconds rather than notations like quarter notes or eighth notes or something like that. Moving on, let's check out, I'm gonna turn off the echo and we're gonna turn on space. We're turning on the final frontier. Actually, it kind of is the final frontier aside from the actual output. So let's hear what this reverb sounds like.
I remember, don't you waste it, our time isn't free. Love keeps pouring.
Elise, where did you go? You fell down the well. That's obviously way too much. Let's start with a smaller size and hear what that sounds like. Let's go to a different part of the song.
Clock keeps ticking, time's not waiting. Stop, can't let it be. Raise the banner, don't deny it. You're the remedy. I remember, don't you waste it. Our time isn't free. Love keeps pouring, don't deny it.
We just put Elise in a little tiny bucket.
Clock keeps ticking.
Anyway, that's obviously pretty ridiculous in terms of settings. We wouldn't really actually do that. Here's a much more realistic, good sounding setting.
Clock keeps ticking, time's not waiting. Stop, can't let it be.
Yeah, so it just puts a nice little halo around it. Combined with the echo, it's gonna sound huge.
I remember, don't you waste it. Our time isn't free. Love keeps pouring, don't deny it. You're the remedy.
Yeah, so that's starting to sound pretty great. So now we are on to the final countdown, the last module, which is just the output module. It's only got 2 buttons aside from the power button, which just turns the thing on and off. And we've got the gain output. So far, we've only had to bump it up one notch. So we've got a pre-effects and a limit button. So let's see what those do.
Clock keeps ticking, time's not waiting. Stop, can't let it be. Raise the banner, don't deny it. You're the remedy. I remember, don't you waste it. Our time isn't free. Blood keeps pouring, don't deny it.
All right, let's hear that in the final mix.
Clock keeps ticking, time's not waiting. Stop, can't let it be. Raise the banner, don't deny it. You're the remedy.
Yeah, it just gives it that last little bit of slam, smooths it out a bit for the final touch on your lovely sounding vocal. They've conveniently put a little sweet spot marker to tell you that you have hit the sweet spot, which we did. Look at that. We hit that yellow, but not red. I feel like the reward is really is a great sounding vocal track, but you know, there's something nice and Pavlovian about getting a little beep. It's like a gold star, you know what I mean? Your little light going out and saying, you did it. Congratulations, you didn't blow it. Here's a real crucial point that we're hitting. As you can see from this waveform, we're about to go from super powerful, you know, balls out Elise, really giving it all, to this bridge where she's really being very dynamic, to say the least, and doing this like real soft kind of a singing. And we haven't changed the output of this at all. It's very tiny. So if we go from one to the other, are we still going to be able to hear it? Are we going to have to put this on a different track or something like that, something with different settings? Let's see what happens.
You cannot lead my...
Too bad. If I turn it off, it disappears completely. I mean, obviously that's what a compressor and a limiter are supposed to do, take a signal and boost it up, but I didn't have to change anything at all. It sounds awesome. That's a way too complex explanation of what's going on in here. You could dial it in 2 seconds. You can, first of all, I'm gonna make a preset of this right now. It's gonna be called, actually I'm gonna call it Elise 1. And if this is what you've dialed in, you could just pull this up and pull up the preset and you're good to go. I'm gonna try this for my voice in a second here, just to get a slightly different take on it. So even though I just spent kind of a long time explaining all of this stuff and trying out all the different parts, there really isn't a whole hell of a lot of rope to hang yourself with, you know? All of these settings sound really good. You can just dial in like a little bit of everything. It'll take you 2 seconds to get a sound that's really, really good and has everything that you need, so you don't have to like pull up a whole chain of a bunch of different plugins and mess around with stuff. You could just pull this up and it's gonna sound great basically immediately. You could have one separate plugin for everything that each one of these modules and still maybe not get as good of a sound because you're just overthinking it, doing too much work. I really like this because it's the shortest distance between a raw vocal take that you just recorded and something that you can use in a mix right now. So we've heard what it sounds like on a female vocal. Let's see what it sounds like on me. So here's the part just dry by itself.
Keep playing it for the weak, unconscious idiocracy.
When we tracked this vocal, we tracked with a lot of compression on the way in, so it's printed to the track. Let's try turning the compression off entirely and see what happens.
Keep playing it for the weak, unconscious idiocracy.
Yeah, so that makes a bit more sense without the compressor on entirely. We are just going to use all this other stuff, the EQ, the multiplier, the width. We tracked these vocals into a really nice mic. We used a Telefunken AK-47. Let's try and see if we can get something that sounds comparable using a less amazing setup. I'm going to try recording right here, right now, using this dynamic mic. It's a Lewitt MTP 440. I have this for my streams. It's just a nice dynamic mic, basically like an SM57. I'm gonna go straight into my Apollo Twin. I'm not gonna use any of the preamp modeling or anything. And we're gonna hear just what this sounds like, because you're probably gonna buy this because you're a singer and you wanna make your vocal parts sound amazing without having to also be an incredible engineer and having all kinds of crazy gear. So let's see what that sounds like. I'm gonna set that up and we'll hear what that sounds like right now. So our signal chain right now, you can see here in the console for the Apollo.
Keep playing it for the weak, unconscious idiocracy.
Let's see if we can make this sound at least kind of comparable to the take that we got in the studio using a super nice condenser mic. For example, this take that we're comparing it to, we used the Telefunken AK-47 condenser mic. We went into an 1176 Blue Stripe, and I think we used the Warm Audio 1073 as a preamp. That's like a big expensive vocal chain. So let's hear what that sounds like raw and with the Howard Benson chain on it. Let's try that out.
Keep playing it for the weak, unconscious idiocracy. Keep playing it for the weak, unconscious idiocracy.
I'm gonna add a little bit more grit to sort of match the original take.
Keep playing it for the weak. Unconscious idiocracy.
Here's the original.
Keep playing it for the weak. Unconscious idiocracy.
All right, now we're gonna hear the first half of the live take and the second half of the other take. Let's see if we can hear the difference.
Keep playing it for the weak. Unconscious idiocracy.
Now, obviously, they're a little bit different.
Keep playing it for the weak. Unconscious idiocracy.
But that's close enough that I don't think I could pick it out in a mix. They sound so close that it's kind of terrifying, actually. Keeping in mind that this is all one plugin. We go from this
Keep playing it for the weak.
to this.
Unconscious idiocracy.
In one plugin. So it seems to me that this plugin is primarily targeted at singers. But if you're an engineer and you need to get somebody sounding banging right away, this could be your one-stop shop, especially if you've got a singer and they just need something to sound really good for monitoring. You want to make them sound like $1 million, but you don't want to set up a big complex vocal chain. You could pull this up, and for purposes of tracking and maybe even for the final mix, who knows, you could get something that they're going to love so that they're going to sing better, so that they'll sound better, and this is going to do that all in one plugin, all in one small but super effective vocal chain that are simple enough for a non-engineer to use, but powerful enough that they're gonna make you sound like gold. Really super high-powered producers might not really love this plugin because they probably have a plugin or a piece of hardware that does what each one of these little modules does completely on its own, and probably has a lot more specific, finely tuned controls that they like. But I can't think of anything else that has all of this stuff in one where they all work really well and sound really good and are this easy to use. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Hopefully you got a pretty good feel for what the JST Howard Benson Vocal Suite is all about. As always, if you haven't already, mash that subscribe button, smack the bell to join the notification squad, because sometimes we do giveaways, and if you don't have your notifications turned on, you're not gonna win, you're gonna miss it. And leave a comment in the comments section letting me know what you think of the Howard Benson Vocal Suite, if this is something that you would use, if you use something like this, if you prefer to use whatever 6 separate plugins or whatever. And drop us a like for more reviews and original content. And I'll see you real soon.